Welcome everybody who came this evening to Brookline Reads and the Climate Action Group's wonderful weekend event. My name is Judy Steinberg, and I'm honored as the first Poet Laureate of Brookline to open this evening. I really loved reading Kristen Kimball's book, and as I was saying, I would come down every night and tell my husband that I now know everything about pigs, or I know how to give birth to a calf, and so forth. But I actually have never planted any vegetables, so I'm going to read a poem about buying a cabbage. The origin of cabbage. I drove over to Buzzell's for some fresh corn, and there was a cabbage so big and healthy looking, I had to buy it. 75 cents, and it weighed probably 6 pounds, easy. I don't even like cabbage, but this one made you want to like it. Pale green and shiny, like someone had just polished it, and veins like on the forearm of a construction worker. It seemed like just one leaf, the outer one, had built a whole town with no help. The outer edge of this outer leaf curled over in a sort of wide open grin, and peeling that leaf back, another with its own creeks, tributaries, and deltas. I swear the whole damn Mississippi lives in this next leaf. And the next one, just slightly paler, and the next one, a bit more tender and ruffled a little, like a grown woman in gowns, and so on. The whole thing packed and dense. Couldn't get more food than this into a ball. It feels good just to hold it under your arm. So I bring this cabbage home and admire it for a while, showing it off to friends as if I'd given birth to it. And it does seem unlikely that a thing like a cabbage could just grow out of the ground rather than condensing, say, into a cool green planet in orbit around the sun. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judith. We're grateful to have someone of your distinction and talent to kick off this evening's event and to serve as Brookline's first Poet Laureate. This position was established by the Board of Selectmen in January of last year, and Judy will be serving in this role for 2 years. And she's chosen a wonderful poem for tonight's event. Thank you, Judith. My name is Dave Pantalone, and I've been chair of the Brookline Reads committee for the past year. I'm also a board member of Climate Action Brookline. These two organizations that have teamed up to create tonight's event has also done several other events during Climate Week. The Brookline Reads Committee, sponsored by the trustees, began a year ago to discuss and select a book for this year's program. Food was already chosen as a theme of Climate Week 2013, so we looked to find a book that carried this theme, the broader themes of climate and sustainability, and was also able to capture the reader and be worthy of the goal of Brookline Reads, which is a community that reads together. We considered several books, even considered choosing more than one book. As we discussed the pros and cons and narrowed the list, there was one book that we kept coming back to and which never dropped off the list, and that was The Dirty Life by Kristen Kimball. I think the reason is revealed by the book's own subtitle, a memoir of farming, food, and love. The fact that it is a memoir tells you that this is a story, and a very personal one. If you have read the book, you not only see the zeal for sustainability in the way they run farm, but the remarkable and personal commitment and determination that they face in the face of physical hardship and risk that they have to deal with every day. Consider this one sentence from the book. I had always been attracted to the empty, sparkly grab of instant gratification, but I was beginning to learn something about the peace that you can find inside an infinite challenge. This is the character and the wisdom that we need in the climate movement. The best bio for Kristen is what she says about herself on the farm's webpage. It's another example of Kristen's warmth and disarming style. I was born in 1971 and grew up in central New York. I graduated from Harvard in 1994, then moved to New York City, where I worked at a literary agency, taught creative writing, and freelanced for magazines and travel guides. In 2002, I interviewed a wingnut farmer named Mark and took more than a professional interest in both him and his vocation. We founded Essex Farm together in 2004, the world's first full diet CSA, as far as we know, and I have been professionally dirty ever since. Mark and I have 2 daughters, and I have 3 great jobs: mother, farmer, and writer. Kristen has written for several publications since the publication of Dirty Life, including O Magazine, Bold, and Gourmet Live, and she and Mark have been featured in many other publications. Kristen has also been working on a follow-up to the Dirty Life. So without further ado, it is my extreme pleasure to bring you Kristen Kimball.
Thanks, everybody. Let's see here. I want to start by saying a very special thank you, not only to the library and to all of you for coming out tonight, but to David and to Mary, for whom I think I might have been the most annoying and challenging author they've ever tried to hook for this gig, which is an awesome gig. They started trying to get in touch with me last summer, and anybody who farms knows that summer on a farm means that everything is happening, and the last thing that tends to get done is answering emails. So they might well have sent me 10 or 20 emails, which I didn't respond to, and then Mary got in touch with my speaking agent, and he got in touch with me, and I still didn't respond, and then she got in touch with my editor, and I still didn't respond. So then she turned up at the farm. On a bicycle. And anybody who turns up on our farm in the summer gets put to work. So immediately we put her out in the field harvesting tomatoes, and she turned out to be an excellent tomato harvester. And after that, you really can't say no. So here I am, with deep gratitude to Mary and to David for putting this together, and to all of you for turning out tonight. So, I know that some of you have read the book, and other people may not have read the book. So I thought I would try to put us all on an equal footing by giving you the sort of visual cliff notes of The Dirty Life. I'm going to run you through the whole story. If you have read the story, then hopefully I'll keep your interest by showing you pictures.
Can we get the lights?
Oh. And there seems to be something wrong with the way the slides are showing up. David, do you know if there's a way to make it not? Yeah, when I had it on before, it was like that's just a corner of the slide. David is also the most prepared organizer that I've ever met. He sent me directions on how to get here that included at least a paragraph at every turn on what lane I should be in. Oh, there we go. So. Okay. It worked before, honest.
We're getting snippets.
I think I probably can figure it out.
All right, come on up. While we're doing that, yay. Okay, while we're doing that, we're going to play a little parlor game. I love asking this when I talk. So if you are currently a farmer or aiming to be a farmer, could you please raise your hand? Keep your hands up. If you are the daughter or son of a farmer, could you also raise your hand? And farmers, keep your hands up too. If you're the granddaughter or grandson of a farmer, and if you're the great-granddaughter or great-grandson of a farmer. So here's something that I read recently that you all should pay attention to. There's actually an agricultural psychologist who's done studies on the psychology of farmers, and he says that he believes that agriculture is so deeply necessary to human civilization that it takes 3 generations to get farming out of your bones and only 1 generation to get it back. So all of you who just raised your hand are still farmers, and those of you who raised your hand in the first round, your children, your grandchildren, and your great-grandchildren are all doomed. Okay. All right. Yay, okay. Thank you so much for doing that. Okay. So, this is me in 2001.
Can you get the lights?
What's that?
Can you dim the lights?
Oh, the light? So, this is me 2001. I was living in the East Village of New York City. As you may well have inferred by that photo, I was not a farmer. But I was a writer, and that was the year that I read a book called Fast Food Nation. Does anybody know that book? Eric Schlosser, yep, everybody knows that book. I believe that's the book that really kicked off this whole movement that we're enjoying right now. I read that book having really not thought very deeply about food before, and I closed it and I was changed. And because I was a writer, as most of you know, the book is about sort of what was going wrong with our industrial scale food system. But as a writer, the question that came to me when I finished the book was, well, what does it look like when people are doing it differently? What does it look like, and who are the characters when people are farming on a small scale and, you know, selling their food locally and doing it really differently from what he described? And so I began looking around the Hudson Valley, and I discovered this whole little young subculture of kids who had just graduated from mostly liberal arts colleges with very expensive educations that their parents had funded. And they left school dreaming of being farmers. They were starting little pop-up farms all over the Hudson Valley, doing an acre of vegetables here, you know, a little tiny herd of micro dairy there. And I thought that was a really great story, you know, because what I knew from my time growing up was that anybody who was smart enough and had the option to do anything else was trying as hard as they could to get out of farming. And here's this stream of kids who were going into farming. And so I started interviewing all sorts of young farmers, and eventually my search for somebody to profile led me all the way to central Pennsylvania, where I met this very tall, very energetic, articulate, and somewhat crazy farmer named Mark. And Mark was running a vegetable CSA for, I think about 150 families. He was absolutely the perfect subject because he never stopped talking. He was usually really funny, and he managed to create so much conflict around himself that there was always plot being created. And so I decided that I really wanted to write about him. And I went to my agent, and she was like, I can never sell this book, but go ahead, do whatever you want to do. And I went back to his farm and worked for a few weekends and really got quite into my subject. And the next thing you know, I did the most unprofessional thing that a writer can do, which is fall in love with him. He cleans up all right, doesn't he? And in very short order, he left his farm in Pennsylvania, and I left my apartment in New York City, and we went looking for a piece of land together. And we ended up in the very cold northern part of New York State, in the middle of the Adirondack Park, on 500 acres that hadn't been used in a very long time. And there we decided to stake our claim and give it a shot. And I really was quite ignorant about pretty much everything about farming. And Mark is crazy. And so this farm that he wanted to create was something that, as far as we knew, had never been done before. He wanted to make a farm that would provide a full diet for his members year-round. He wanted to make it free choice so that you would show up at our farm and pick whatever you wanted for the week in whatever quantity or combination. And he wanted to power it with draft horses. And that was a big hook for me because I have loved horses since I was a child and never thought that I would be rich enough to have them in my life again. So I was on board with this whole plan, not having any idea how crazy it was, thank goodness. And so we set out with very little capital, a lot of hope, and lo and behold, we got the material for a book. And I thought I would show you some pictures. These are pictures that I've taken over the years of what the farm looks like. Some of them are from our first year and some are more recent. This is our herd of beef cattle. We have a mixed herd right now. The cow that's right in front is a Scottish Highland cow. Our first few cows were all Scottish Highland. They're a really hardy breed, and they can do pretty well on pasture that's not of particularly good quality. They're one of the few breeds that will actually grow a smaller frame if they don't have really great quality forage to eat. And we have really enjoyed the Scottish Highland cattle, but we're now moving into slightly beefier breeds. We started farming pigs. This was a sow named Strawberry who you can probably see had 13 piglets there, and she managed to raise every single one of them, which was great. We raise hens for eggs. I think our flock of hens is something around 500 birds these days, but we started with 12. They live in a couple of mobile coops that get dragged around the pastures in the summer, and in the winter they live in greenhouses with some runs behind the greenhouses. We also raise chickens for meat. These are our broiler chicks, and they arrive as one-day-old birds in the mail. And they fill the post office with a very annoying So whenever the birds arrive, we get a very early morning call from the post office saying, your birds are here, come get them. After the chicks have been in the brooder where they have artificial heat for about 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, depending on the weather, they move outside into these mobile coops. And these coops get moved every day so that the birds get fresh grass and also spread their manure evenly over the field. Wow. And broiler chickens are, especially the breed that we raise, which is Cornish crosses, they're very, very high consumers of grain and protein, which is an enormous investment on a farm, especially if you're trying to grow your own grains. But one of the side benefits is that all of that grain has so much nitrogen in it that when the birds are moved across the field, they very heavily fertilize the field behind them. And in fact, my neighbor has an airplane, and in the summer, I always ask her to take me up and fly me over the field where the chickens are, because you can see from the air this brilliant streak of bright green grass that grows in a perfect line behind the coops where it's been moved. We have our own butchering facilities on the farm. All of our animals are killed in the field and then butchered in our butcher shop. And butcher shop is kind of a fancier word than we should use for it, because actually it's just a tractor trailer box that we have refrigerated. Everything that we do on the farm is fairly low tech and low cost, and the butcher shop is no exception. It's just a refrigerated box trailer that we can, that we added electricity and plumbing to, so that we can wash down the walls and cool the meat. This is one of our chicken harvests, and you can see it takes about, 5 people can do maybe 160 birds in 2-3 hours, something like We have our little micro dairy, and we milk Jersey cows still. We're currently milking about 18 cows, and we rotate them on grass. They're all grass-fed. This is a picture that I took last fall because the grass is a cover crop that we planted to improve the soil and then decided to graze it, and the cows were, it was like we had let them loose, you know, in a field of crack or something. It was just absolutely crazy. They loved it so much. And this is just pure cow porn because I think cows are lovely and beautiful. And this picture just makes me happy to look at, and I hope it does you too. A lot of our energy and our time also goes toward growing vegetables. We did about 16 acres of vegetables this year, in probably about 50 different kinds of vegetables. But I included this picture because I wanted to make the point that since we're a year-round CSA, we focus a lot of our energy during the growing season on the crops that we can store for the winter. So this is our beet crop from last year. And while people tend to ignore beets during the summer, about this time of year when the other things are starting to run out in the root cellar, the beets start looking really good, and we have plenty of them. So beets, carrots, cabbages, onions, garlic, rutabaga, celeriac, those are the crops, and potatoes, obviously potatoes, are the things that really get us through the winter. We've started focusing a little bit more on fruit by popular demand. We currently do strawberries and raspberries. These are our two children, Jane and Miranda, and melons. And in the 5-year plan, we hope to add an orchard, probably an apple orchard, maybe some sour cherries, maybe some pears. We also do grains, both for our animals and for ourselves. This is wheat, but we do a lot of corn. We also do oats, and some years we do some rye. And now we get to the part that really did hook me, and the part that I still love more than anything else on the farm, and that's the horses. We do have tractors on the farm, but nearly all of our field work is done with horses. We started out working one team of 2 horses, that was Sam and Silver, and then we added another team of horses, and then as our membership grew bigger, and I should have mentioned this before, but we started our first season with 7 members, and this is our 9th season, and we have about 230, 240 members. So in these 9 years, we've really had to learn how to scale up quickly in a way that, you know, nobody else really does with horses. So we went from using 2 horses hooked together to using bigger hitches of horses. This is a configuration called 4 abreast, and it's actually quite easy to drive because it's just the same as driving 2 horses. You have all the horses hooked to the same number of lines that you would have if you had 2 horses. And then this past year, we started hooking 6 horses together, and this was taken on the first day that I drove 6 horses. And to drive 6 in this configuration, you have to have 2 different sets of lines, so that you're steering the horses that are in front separately from the horses that are in back. And that can be a little bit hairy the first time that you do it. There's a lot of power out there, and it can get a little confusing if you're not sure which lines you're pulling on. But it's just great fun, and if you ever get the chance to drive a team of horses, I fully recommend it.
What's the advantage? Because aren't you still just pulling one plow sort of thing behind the last set of horses?
The question was, what's the advantage? Aren't you still pulling one thing behind you? You are pulling one thing, but you can pull one much bigger thing. So you can cover far, far more field than if you were using just 1 horse. So with 2 horses, you're, for example, with 2 horses, you'd be pulling 1 bottom of a plow, so you'd just be making 1 furrow at a time. With 6 horses, you can pull 2 much bigger bottoms on a plow. So you can make 2 furrows at a time, and they're wider. So to scale up, we really needed to move toward tractor-sized implements instead of tiny little horse-sized implements. Does that make sense? So the other new addition of power on the farm is this solar array that you can see in the background of that photo. We got a combination of grants to put up this 25 kilowatt solar array, which is currently producing just a little more power than we need on the farm. So that provides all of our electricity. We're tied into the grid, and we sell our energy to the grid and buy it back from the grid, but we're just about zeroed out, just about. And all of this really is in service to the fact that we love to eat really well. Still, 9 years in, I'm still astounded by the taste and the quality of food that comes off of our land. I say that with humility because it's not always great, but it really is a treat and a blessing to be able to eat as well as we do. This is a picture of our tomato harvest last year, and it was almost as infinite as it looks. And Mary, probably that looks familiar to you, right? She picked a lot of them. I think sometimes we tend to forget, because vegetables are so beautiful, we forget that there are other things that we need to sustain us. And it's also a lovely thing to be able to have your own grain that gets ground fresh every week and to be able to make bread out of it. Really, this is just food. And the other great pleasure that we get from our work is our members. Our members are incredibly appreciative of the food that they get. They're very involved in the farm. They're involved in our family, and we're deeply involved in our members and in their family. When people ask us why we promote this model that we use, one of the big answers is that when you provide a full diet to a family in your community, it produces this thing that we call atomic loyalty. We have members who, have gestated and raised their children almost entirely on the food from our farm. And so, the atoms of their children are actually made from the stuff that came off of our soil. And I think that produces a kind of love and loyalty between the farmer and the eater that is unique and really beautiful, and it makes the work incredibly satisfying. And I think I'll pause there for a little while and maybe turn the lights up, if you don't mind, David. And just see if you all have any questions at this point on how the farm works, or if I've left out anything that makes it confusing, you can ask me now, and then we'll have another chance for questions at the end. Yes?
Well, basically, I'm jealous. You say it's unique to have this sort of relationship between the customer and the farmer, and I'm wondering, the overall question I'll ask is, what can we city folk do because it's an economic challenge from the get-go. I did read the book, and I could feel the economic challenges you face. So what can we city folks do to write our congressman or whatever to make it a little easier?
Well, I misspoke a little when I said it's unique. I think we're unusual in that we provide more of our members' needs than a lot of farms do. But when I asked how many farmers were in the room, a lot of hands went up, and I bet at least one of those farmers serves this area. And so, yes, writing your congressman is great, but also making sure that you support one of those farmers in the room and getting your vegetables from them would be a really wonderful step in that direction. There's loads and loads of CSAs that supply this area.
There's one farmer that comes to the Brookline farmers market that does similar to what you're talking about. Yes, members of this.
We should have a farmer to customer exchange at the end of the talk, and everybody can meet and give out samples and exchange phone numbers at the end. Yes?
biking bikes up there. One of the things that they mentioned in the beginning of the book is that the soil, it was a clay soil. And I know clay soil, I garden, and I didn't know you could change clay soil. So I was wondering if you could speak about that.
Yeah.
And I have another question. It's a really big farm, and there's just the two of you, and you have people who come and help. Do you have a consistent workforce, or is it just like you just never know who's going to show up? And I'm just amazed when I read the book is how much you do.
Yeah, well, I'll answer the second part first, because I don't want to give the wrong impression. And I'm going to talk about it in more detail in the second half of the talk. But we have 10 employees now. It's no longer just the two of us. There's no way in the world that we could have sustained the pace that we worked at our first couple of years. And then as we grew, it became really obvious that we needed to hire people. So we now have 10 people who work with us full time. And that team grows a little bit in the summer when it's harvest season. And back to the soil question, a large part of our farm is clay. And then we have about 30 acres that are the most beautiful sandy loam that you could possibly imagine. So the clay parts we keep in pasture, and they're really great for grazing. We don't have to till those up. And then the sandy loam parts are the areas where we rotate our vegetables and our cover crops and our grains. So that was a really good nerdy farm question. I like that.
You're not going to try to change the clay soil, or it's not possible?
The question was, can you change clay soil? And you can add things to lighten it up, but its basic nature is always going to be heavy. One of the biggest improvements that we've made in the last few years is to drain the wet parts of our farm. We've added tile drainage to about 20 acres. And in clay, your biggest problem is the roots of the plant are just wet, and plants hate that. When you add drainage, it lightens it up a little bit, but it's kind of going to be what it is. Yes?
What's the farthest your member comes?
What's the farthest that our members travel? This is actually really embarrassing because, we want to be a very local farm, but we have a family that drives 2 hours to get to us every week. They can't get the kind of food that they want at the same price that we offer where they live. And they live around near Albany, and they drive up to us every week.
Wow.
Yeah.
How is your farm and the other farms of this generation overcoming whatever the crises were that were leading to the total collapse of family farms? I
It's-
know big debt was one of the issues with the farms, but
Such a good question. The question was how is it that our farm and other of the new farm generation are overcoming the difficulties of that we're putting farms under, especially in the 80s and the 90s. And certainly there's still a lot of farms who are struggling deeply, but the biggest difference is direct marketing. We're selling directly to our consumer. There's no middleman. There's nobody telling us how to set our prices. If you're a dairy farmer, basically your milk price is out of your control. If you're selling to, unless you're selling directly to a person. So direct marketing has really been the key to this huge renaissance of small family-sized farms that we've been watching come online in the last 10 years.
So is it competition?
Is it competition?
Do you have competition?
Do we have competition? We do, and we love having competition. When we started farming in our area, we were the only farm, and several of our employees have started farms in the area nearby doing very similar things, and it really has not hurt us. The market is still big enough that there's room for a lot more people, and we find that the more people join the market, the more farms that there are available, the stronger the farm infrastructure is. So a lot of the farms around us are also draft horse powered now. They trained with us and they started draft horse powered farms. So we suddenly have this very lively draft horse culture. We can share horses, we can share tools, we can share know-how, we can share training, and it's actually helping all of us. Yeah. Yes?
In terms of direct marketing, I know that I happen to love most vegetables more than I like things like brownies and fruit and things like that, so it's a little weird, but I know it's a hard sell for a lot of people, and one of the big struggles, I imagine, especially if you're providing everything year round, is like selling people on the fact that in January you're eating beets and cabbage
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah. The question is, how do you convince people that it's really great to only eat roots in the winter? We haven't been fully successful in that. Our members really would like to have greens available, maybe not in the dead of winter, but early spring, late fall. So we will probably be adding some season extension, it's called, to our green production by adding some greenhouses or high tunnels or just row covers so that we can grow hardy greens late into the fall and early in the summer. But what we try to do is educate people on how truly delicious and versatile those roots can be. And I really mean that. I love roots, and I don't miss the greens until we get into May or early June. I honestly feel that our bodies are really do well when they are eating roots in the winter and greens in the summer. We also encourage our members to put up the summer vegetables during the season so that they have them in their freezer or in their pantry to be able to use them in the winter. And our members are allowed to we grow enough so that our members can take enough during the growing season to put up as much as they want for the winter.
And do you do like workshops and stuff to help people do that, or?
We should do workshops to teach people to do that sort of thing. One of our employees is a master canner. I didn't even know this was a certification, but you can be a master canner. And we have a really active range in our community, which is, it's an old organization where people would have a building in the community that was really for agricultural education use. And our grange is still alive and well, and it has a commercial kitchen. So our employee, Barbara, runs some classes there for the community. Yeah.
Do you people have a greenhouse?
Do we have a greenhouse? We do. We have 2 greenhouses that we use to start our plants. But we don't use our greenhouses in the winter. Right now they have chickens in them. Yeah.
One of the challenges I've read about organic farming around cattle are the rules and regulations around butchering.
Uh-huh.
And are you able to get around that, or do you have certain, that I know farms sometimes have heard that it's just not economically feasible to be able to raise meat because they can't get anywhere.
Yeah, that's a great question. It was about slaughterhouses and how we handle doing our animals on farm. So we have always tended to ask forgiveness rather than permission on all of the legal things. And we started out doing our own slaughtering on the farm because we believed that it was the right thing to do. And eventually, as it was inevitably it would happen, the USDA showed up at our farm and said, let's just take a look at what you're doing. And Mark somehow did some weird farm jujitsu move. And by the time the USDA guy had left, he not only believed that it was okay that we were doing what we were doing, but he was going to do whatever he could to support us and make it happen. So what we worked out is that we are allowed to slaughter on farm and butcher because our members technically own the livestock before they're killed. So we're considered an on-farm processor, which is the same designation they would give us if we were a religious cult. And these things, it turns out, are rather subjective, and luckily it's all working out well now, but you never know what would happen if we were to change inspectors or something shifts in Albany. So right now everything is really good, and we hope that it stays that way because we feel very strongly about it. It's a huge problem in local meat production because if we had to ship our cattle to the nearest inspected slaughterhouse, not only would it ethically not feel right to us, but it just couldn't economically be done the way that we do it. So, yes?
You have both tractors and horses on your farm. What determines what you do with each one?
What determines when we use the tractors and when we use the horses? Yeah. There's some things that we cannot do with horses, like lift really heavy stuff. And for that, we have a tractor that has a bucket loader on it. So if we have to move, 2-ton bags of grain around the farmyard, that's definitely going to be a tractor job. All of our fields are set up when we plant our vegetables so that only the horses can work those rows because of the spacing. So all the field work is going to be done with the horses. And then there's a whole bunch of stuff that falls in between. And the rule on that is that we use the horses whenever we possibly can, but if we're behind and something absolutely has to be get done, and there's not time to do it with horses, we fire up a tractor. We have a goal of being completely fossil fuel free in 5 years. It might not happen, but it's a goal, so that's where we are right now. I wanted to say a few more things about where we're headed in the next few years, and then we can ask a few more questions at the end. Yeah, thanks. So Mark and I just had our annual State of the Farm meeting, and sat around and brainstormed over a glass of scotch where we're going. And what came out of the meeting was that we want to refocus in the next few years on kind of making the definition of farm bigger than food. So we want to expand this idea of a farm being a place that provides food into a farm being a place that provides as many of the material needs of our members as we possibly can. So that includes things like recreation. This is a picture of our members and their kids playing hockey on the farm pond this past week. The ice has been beautiful. It means adding firewood to our share. So starting this year, our members can take their firewood from our farm. That part of it is so far all horse powered. We have a great logger who works his horses in the woods, and he brings the logs down and they get bucked up, and we hope to add a horse powered treadmill that would actually power a wood splitter. Eventually we hope that it would mean also providing building materials for some of our members, either in the form of straw or in the form of wood. And Mark really would like to provide fiber for clothing, which I think is completely insane, but I thought all of this was insane, so I'm just holding on. Yeah, maybe flax. I don't even know if people grow flax anymore, but wool, flax, buckskin, who knows? And then our second direction, which I started talking about just a little bit a minute ago, I wanted to emphasize the fact that it's not just Mark and me anymore. We have this unbelievable team of people who show up at 6 o'clock every morning and often work until 6 o'clock in the evening. This is a pre-dawn vegetable harvest this fall. They work incredibly hard, and they're eager to do it and eager to learn. We also have a really good time doing it. To a person, the people who work on the farm and who have worked on the farm in the last 9 years have been amazing people that you would all want to have dinner with, but they have great biceps, better biceps than any dinner partner you've ever had. So the people who come to work for us come from lots of different backgrounds. The guy on the left carrying these leeks down the field, his name is Liam, and he finished his first year at the ag school at Cornell and realized that he could go to Cornell for 4 years in the ag school and graduate without having a single practical farm skill. And his parents are actually neighbors of ours, and he spent the summer working for us, and then he dropped out of Cornell, which his parents are not very happy about. So that's Liam. He'll be with us for another year at least. So this woman graduated from Columbia Law, and she practiced in a really fancy New York City firm for 4 years. And there she is pulling the head off of a chicken at our place. After 4 years of practicing law, she decided that food was what she was really interested in, and she started looking for farms to work on, and she found us. And this is Jenny. Jenny studied urban planning, and then she started migrating toward food and worked at Chez Panisse in California, and then she traced that line just of interest, just a little further back, and she went to work for a farm called Full Belly Farm in California, and after being there for a year, she came to us. So what I'm saying in a long-winded way is what each of those people really want from us is really good agricultural training. And the one thing that we really cannot provide for them is good agricultural training. So our new venture starting this year is something called the Essex Farm Institute. And it's a nonprofit that is evolving into a school, which we believe will be a 4-year program for people who are 18 or older, not children, these are adults, that will provide a combination of academic and real hands-on farm skills to people who want to make farming a career. So I imagine we're going to be good and busy for the next couple of years. We're planning on enrolling our first students in the fall of 2014. And that basically is what we're up to. So I think we have a few more minutes if people have some more questions. And after that, we're going to sign some books. If you want to buy books out in the foyer, there's some books for sale. So who's got questions? Yes, there in the back.
My question is from the book. You mentioned you were a vegetarian.
Yeah.
It seemed in a short span of sentences that you just covered the fact you made a quantum leap in the opposite direction. How hard was that? And how hard was it for your body to adapt?
So did everybody hear? Can you guys hear the question, or should I repeat it?
Yeah.
You can hear it. Okay. It's so funny because that is the one question that I consistently get at every single reading. So let me give you my thoughts on it because I'm prepared for that. I was a vegetarian for 13 years. I was a vegetarian because I couldn't see the part of the food system where the meat was coming from, and I didn't know what was going on back there, and I didn't trust it. There's lots of reasons for people to be vegetarians. There's some people who don't like meat, other people don't believe that it's right to take another life, and I have total respect for all of those points of view, but that wasn't my reason for being a vegetarian. So after becoming deeply involved in the whole process of raising an animal and killing it, I knew in my bones that I was comfortable with it. It was not a difficult transition for me physically to start eating meat again. My body really was working super hard at that point and really wanted meat. So physically it wasn't a hard change for me, but I think that the actual act of killing an animal is hard for anybody. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
So, my fiance, Jake, he, similar to some of your employees, over the past year has been transitioning from the business world in which he was in consulting business for the last 4 years and has started the journey into farming. And I was with the City Builders and I've been ambivalent about it. But after reading in last April, he was making a decision whether to accept his first farming apprenticeship. And someone recommended your book and I read the first 50 pages and I was on board after that. So I'm wondering.
I'm so sorry.
My question is, what advice do you wish you had when you were first making the transition from city life into farming?
Wow. Well, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Are you going to be co-farmers with him, or are you going to be the one who has a town job and?
So I'm in social work, so I would like to have our world merge somehow, but I'm going to have a job, maybe something, be involved in the summer, but not as a full-time gig.
All right, so number one advice would be to pick a day where he's not allowed to farm, where the two of you have to just look at each other and be a couple, because a farm is always going to compel you to go outside and do something else. And I think it's really easy for relationships to be lost on the intensity of what the farm requires of you. And I don't know where this came from, but Mark told me that more farms are lost, not to bankruptcy, but to burnout and divorce. Farm can't sustain that. So you have to privilege your relationship over the needs of the farm as much as you possibly can. And I wish we knew that earlier on because our first 3 years really were unsustainable. And I guess the other advice I would give you would be to get really, really good training, for him to get really good training before he strikes out on his own. Yeah. Cool. Good luck to you. Yes, in the back.
Do your members ever pick their own food?
Do our members ever pick their own food? Yes, they do.
All right.
really small things like strawberries, peas, raspberries, we have enough labor to sort of bring in a minimum amount for everybody. But if you want to put, 30 pounds of raspberries in your freezer, you have to come out and do that yourself.
All right, and one more thing, what about health insurance and pensions?
I am so proud to say that all of our farmers have health insurance now. I didn't have health insurance for our first 6 years on the farm, and we, through the New York State Healthy New York program, we now provide health insurance for everybody who wants it on the farm. We don't have pensions, no. The farmer's pension has traditionally been his land, and we've been lucky enough to be able to buy 80 acres of our land. And I think we're going to be able to buy the rest of our 500 home acres, and I consider that our retirement, I think that when it's time for us to, when we can't lift a bale of hay anymore, we'll probably sell the land to another farmer, unless our children want it, which is a dim possibility. Yes?
Is your produce organic? And if it is that a big reason that people come to you?
Is our produce organic? And if so, is that a big reason for our members to join up? No, we are not certified organic. However, we follow organic practice. Our deal with our members is that we follow organic practice unless we tell you we're doing otherwise. So there have been examples on our farm where we've used antibiotics on our animals and kept those animals in our herds. And if we were a certified organic farm, those animals would have to be marketed separately from our organic animals, and that's just not feasible in our system. We use only organic feed, certified organic feed, or feed that we've grown ourselves. We've never put anything on our fields that is not within the organic standard. I'm trying to think if there's any other caveats to our organicness. One of the great advantages of being a direct marketer is that we can directly communicate our practices to our members, and we can bring them onto the farm and actually show them what we're doing. So we don't need the organic label as much as a farm would need it if they were marketing to people who don't know them as intimately as our members know us. I tell you though, the thing that people do join our farm for is raw milk. We're a certified raw milk dairy, and the part of the reason that those people drive all the way from Albany is because they very much want raw milk. So organic probably would not help us that much with marketing, but raw milk has been a big one.
Does raw milk stay fresher, longer, or not as long as pasteurized?
Does raw milk stay fresher longer? Well, it varies depending on how clean the milk is and how cold it gets, how quickly it gets cold and how cold it stays. So our milk right now in the winter will last probably 10 days before it sours. I don't know what pasteurized milk would be, but yes.
As you can tell, we all here that means we really loved your book, and I was fascinated by it, and I wish we all had a little lamb farm. But and my daughter wanted to especially let you know that I've been telling them the story of all the things you have done, and they wanted to come and meet you.
Okay.
One thing I wanted to see, and I know it's probably not possible since you don't know so many things going on, is that farming is such a beautiful combination of science and art, and most of the kids, even in this town, in most of our communities, have absolutely no idea. As much as we study, and as you're saying, people going even through agriculture, doing their masters or bachelors, it'd be so neat if we could all, this book or books like yours can actually create that revolution where not just the talk of green and green communities, but the actual understanding of really appreciating how much hard work goes into even growing, a pound of tomatoes.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish we could all, teach our kids at very young age than to wait till we have to leave a profession for which we have paid thousands of dollars.
I know, isn't it a shame? I keep telling these kids who come to our farm and want to be farmers, I keep saying, do not tell your parents you want to be farmers. You got to tell them you want to be sun brokers, and that sounds a lot better. But you know, there's some really hopeful things happening. There's so many schools. I don't know if this is happening in Brookline, but so many schools that now have gardens, which is a beginning. I mean, it's not farming, but it's a beginning, and it connects the children to where their food is coming from at a really young age, and we've seen that as a really positive and powerful force in our area too. You guys should come play with our little girls sometime at the farm. Yes.
You talked about buying some of your feed, like growing some of it.
Yep.
How much do you bring into your system that you don't produce yourself?
How much do we bring in that we don't produce ourselves? It has varied widely depending on how good of a year we've had. This past year we grew all of our own corn, but none of our soy. So we need soy for the high protein content to feed our broiler chickens and our pigs. So we bought in all of our soy, but we grew all of our corn. Other years we've come close to providing all of our own needs. We grow our hay too, so all of our hay comes from our fields. We do maybe 10,000 square bales of hay a year. But really depends on the weather. You know, we had 2 really cruddy years, and our grain bill has been a lot higher than we would have liked. But the goal eventually is to be independent from the larger market, to be able to do as much of our own stuff as we can. Yes?
It's too bad this, the woman in front who was asking the question about farm education, she had to get up and leave, but I'll tell the rest of you this. So there is a school in Western Massachusetts that has a relationship with a couple of Brookline elementary schools. That's the farm school in Alcohol.
Yeah. They've been to our farm, yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So here at Pierce, you know, we take the 7th graders out, and you know, I think Driscoll might take the 5th graders. Maybe there's a few other schools. So. Second and 5th at Driscoll. And 8th. Wow. Yeah, I think during Climate Week there was maybe a reunion between the farm school and Driscoll. And I remember we at Pierce were not invited, so I felt very jealous. But my question, was, so throughout your life you've worn many hats, particularly as this venture of yours has evolved, right? From farmer, author, businesswoman, educator, speaker. So I guess I'm wondering now, like looking back, or maybe even into the future now, various points, which is the most fulfilling for you, and which seems to occupy the most of your time, and you know, what you get from each venture, each point?
Well, I've never done anything for a job that's as fulfilling as farming is, but it's also the most exhausting and frustrating thing in the world. It makes writing look easier. And I find that those 2 jobs go really well together for me. There's this sort of mental, creative work of sitting down at a computer in the morning, and then there's the physical, tiring, also, you know, mental and intellectual work of farming. And for me, they're really compatible. So I guess my answer is both together. And then we had kids. And our daughters are 5 and 2 now, and so they require and deserve a lot of our time and attention. And that job is also, you know, absorbing and wonderful and compelling, but it's a lot, you know? Which is why I don't have another book out right now. But it's coming soon. Okay, one more question, then we have to wrap it up. Yes?
On a more personal note, what about your family and old friends, like they came to your wedding?
Yeah.
How are they in your life now, in a different role?
I think my parents have finally forgiven me for marrying a farmer, mostly. But yeah, a lot of my friends are still in my life. I just had a visit from college friends who lives in Greece, and she came and spent a week on the farm. We had a reunion of some of my college roommates on the farm last year. I think farming is one of those things that if it lights a spark in you, it can be really a profound change. And so a lot of my friends have come to the farm and really found that, you know, that they would like more of it. Some friends never came back. It's not for everybody, you know, and it's still dirty and sweaty, and there's blood and manure, and it stinks, and the compost is rotten, and you know, some animal is not doing what it's supposed to do, and it's still as dirty and frustrating as it was. Maybe a little bit less than our first year, but yeah, I think most people, it touches something in them that, I don't know, that they can feel passionate about or love or want more of. So thank you everybody so much for coming.
I know that everyone here loved the book, and there are many people who couldn't be here tonight who told me they loved the book, and we loved your presentation, and thank you so much. It's wonderful. I also want to thank you for giving me a challenge. I know you like a challenge. Well, I like a challenge, and I wanted to find you. So I was in Vermont, and my friend Pat Marr, who's on the planning committee for Brookline Reads and Climate Week, said, she's not responding, but maybe we should go find her. And Pat couldn't come up because she's a public health nurse. And I said, well, I'm going to go myself. So I caught the ferry and found Kristen on the farm, and I did get my hands dirty picking tomatoes. So I'm proud to be part of your dirty life. And I also want to thank the committee who worked so hard. I was there making contact with her, meeting her children. I didn't meet Mark, however. But I just want to thank the committee. Could you raise your hand if you're on the planning committee? I can't tell you how inspiring it was. David, it was such an inspiring group of people who believed in you and believed that we could make this happen. And I'm just thrilled that we could welcome you all tonight. And I think of the quote from Wordsworth who said, "Nature never did betray the heart that loved her." And I think of you as a wonderful romantic, and then someone with grit, someone who's riding a 6 team of horses, and your powerful insights and how you brought us so close to the natural world in your wonderful book. So thank you so much, and there will be a book signing outside. Thank you all for coming. I wanted to mention that there's some other Climate Week events coming up. Saturday is the forum, a panel called Urban Agriculture Feeding Our Community at the Cooley's Corner Library.